Hey everybody, it's Professor Norwood, and I just decided to record this evening's class since our Zoom attendance has been kind of low, recently. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the final assessment for English 1060. I will post it Monday evening at 6 o'clock around the start of class, and you'll have a week, or you'll have until Friday to get it completed. And the first thing that you should do when you get your final, make sure you read the directions carefully, because once I give you the final, or once it's administered, then I'm not really allowed to give you any assistance just by departmental guidelines. So make sure you have a good understanding of the job that you're being asked to do. And the actual assessment, it's going to be very similar to the practice that you just took. So I just have a few examples of paragraphs that you can seek to model yours after when you do your actual final assessment next week. So the first thing you want to do in your paper is just get your heading up here, right? Name, instructor name, class and date, last name, page number in the right hand corner. Make sure you're using the right font. I'm actually in 11 font right now, but I should be in 12. I'm just in 11 because I wanted to squeeze a lot into just a couple pages here. So make sure you have your font size set to 12. And then for your title, you don't have to waste time thinking of a title. Really, you can just call it final assessment. That's perfectly fine. All right. And once you've read, and you've taken your notes on the article, um, you want to make sure that you put together an essay that's as organized as you can make it. And when I say as organized as you can make it, I'm talking like have an introduction. Make sure your introduction has these three components. Start with an attention grabber. Okay. Um, the attention grabber, you don't have to, pull out all the stops with this, don't waste a ton of time doing that. But just something that reels your reader in. All right. And I have an example here that I'll go through in a second. Definitely make sure you give some background, and background includes, naming the title and author of each source. All right. Born a Crime, and then, whatever the article is for your real final assessment, make sure you put the title of author in both in your intro. And then most importantly, in your intro, you need your thesis statement, right? Your thesis statement is your essay's main idea, and it really holds your essay together. All right. And when we review these things, the first thing we look at, or the first element of these essays that we look at, is the thesis statement. So my suggestion to you all is to try to come up with your thesis statement as early as you can. And really, in early stages of the writing process, you can come up with a couple thesis statements, and then when you do your assessment, you can choose which one suits the direction that you want to go in. All right. So this excuse me, this is an introduction, right? And it begins with our attention grabber, and it's just a statement, designed to reel our readers in. Like I said, oppression in its many forms has been around for much of recorded history. Okay, just a general statement. Generations of one group dominating others is part of the human story. In recent history, South Africa has experienced its own brand of oppression, apartheid. Apartheid was a legal system of segregation and opposition, or excuse me, and oppression that kept whites on top of the social order and blacks on the bottom. Decades before apartheid divided South Africa, the United States had developed a system of oppression to keep blacks down and out. Following emancipation, Jim Crow laws served the same purpose as South African apartheid. So you see, I'm just, just kind of going back and forth, but not really giving too much information, because your introduction is just that. You're introducing ideas. All right. Now, again, as I stated before, make sure you mention the title and the author of each source. All right. Trevor Noah's Born a Crime details the struggles endured by many blacks living under apartheid in South Africa. while David Pilgrim's What Was Jim Crow discusses how Jim Crow affected the lives of Blacks in the United States. And then finally, here's the thesis statement. Although there are minor differences between apartheid and Jim Crow, Noah's and Pilgrim's texts both show that these systems of legalized oppression have much in common. All right, so thesis statement sets the tone for the paper. Okay, so make sure you spend a good amount of time thinking about your thesis statement. All right, make sure it states the main idea and make sure it connects both sources. Okay, and if you look at the comments on the side of this document, it just says what each feature of this introduction is. Okay, you can just click on the note and it'll take you to what it's describing. All right, now after your introduction, you want to start working on the body of your essay. And a good piece of advice, before you start writing your essay, think about the points of comparison you want to make, in the body of your essay. And you can even jot down some notes like, okay, first I want to discuss how Jim Crow and apartheid, forbade interracial relationships. Then I want to talk about how Jim Crow and apartheid affected housing, education, employment, and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And each one of these points, could be used to develop separate paragraphs. All right, in what's called an alternating pattern. All right, an alternating pattern is this. Whatever you talk about for one source, follow it up in the next paragraph where you're talking about the same idea just from a different source. For example, if you're talking about how apartheid, prevented interracial relationships in one paragraph, follow that up in the very next paragraph, talk about how Jim Crow did the same thing in the United States. So first you're going to use an example from Born a Crime, and then follow it up in the next paragraph with a discussion of how, or just using an example from the article you're going to get. And don't try to discuss both sources in the same paragraphs, because that will lead to underdeveloped examples. Okay, so if you look at this paragraph, just like our intro has certain elements, attention grabber, background, and thesis statement, your body paragraph should have certain elements as well. Topic sentence, which states the main idea of the paragraph, and then relevant supporting details. And their goal is to flesh out your topic sentence. All right. You can also try the PIE method as well. PIE, again, is just point, information, explanation. The point is the topic sentence. Information is some example showing the truth of your topic sentence, or showing, really proving the idea in your topic sentence. And then that you conclude with, a follow-up, your explanation in your own words. So this in front of us is actually an example of a PIE paragraph. And again, you can just click on the comments to see what's what. Apartheid was designed to keep Blacks and whites segregated in South Africa. And one of the ways this separation was accomplished was by forbidding interracial relationships. So I just told my reader, and really I told myself as a writer, that this paragraph will be about how apartheid, okay, forbade interracial relationships. That's it. Okay, I'm not talking about Jim Crow yet, not talking about the other source. I'm just going to discuss this one idea in this paragraph. And that's what paragraph unity really entails. One idea per paragraph. One need look no further than the circumstances of Trevor Noah's birth to see how apartheid criminalized intimate relationships between Blacks and whites. Noah, born to a Black mother and a white father, was, quote, born a crime because of the strict laws preventing Blacks and whites from intermingling. Born a Crime begins with the Immorality Act of 1927, a document that made interracial relationships punishable by prison time. Noah describes the dangers that interracial couples faced. Quote, the government went to insane lengths to try to enforce these new laws. The penalty was breaking them was 5 years in prison. There were whole police squads whose only job was to go around peeking through windows. And if an interracial couple got caught, God help them. And then here's my citation. And now always follow up quotes in your own words. The circumstances of Noah's birth were criminal, according to apartheid laws. Constant surveillance and the threat of incarceration for interracial or for racial intermingling held the system of apartheid in place. Okay, and that's it. You know, that was a pie paragraph where here's our topic sentence, states the main idea. Okay, here's our specific example from our text, which is our information, and this is our point. And here's our follow-up, our explanation, you know, in our own words. Okay, now if we're using the alternating pattern, since we discussed how apartheid prevented interracial relationships, we're going to follow that up with a paragraph discussing how Jim Crow prevented interracial relationships. Similar to apartheid, here's a transitional phrase. All right, similar to apartheid, Jim Crow prevented blacks and whites from interacting with one another. Okay, same idea, just you know, we're pulling from a different source. The system of Jim Crow made relationships between blacks and whites a crime, punishable by incarceration and even death. The key difference between apartheid and Jim Crow is both parties in the relationship usually suffered a punishment for intermingling, but in the Jim Crow South, most punishments were leveled at blacks. In What Was Jim Crow, Dr. David Pilgrim notes, under Jim Crow, any and all sexual interactions between black men and white women was illegal, illicit, socially repugnant, and within the Jim Crow definition of rape. Although only 19.2% of the lynching victims between 1882 and 1951 were even accused of rape, lynch law was often supported on the popular belief that lynchings were necessary to protect white women from black rapists. And then here's the citation. In the Jim Crow system, black men discovered to have relations with a white woman were accused of rape and often lynched, sometimes publicly. As both Noah and Pilgrim point out, systems of oppression like apartheid and Jim Crow do not hesitate to use incarceration and violence to keep blacks and whites segregated. So if we look at this paragraph, you know, it's structured the same as the one that came before it, meaning if we're looking at this from a pie perspective, here's the point, here's the information, and then here's the explanation. Okay, so make sure you know try to use an alternating pattern. All right, whatever you discuss, you know, as it relates to the book, discuss that same idea as it relates to the article that you're going to get. So apartheid prevented interracial mingling, and Jim Crow prevented interracial mingling. And it's important that you discuss those ideas in separate paragraphs. Now, after this section, I don't have any fully realized paragraphs to continue this, but perhaps your next section could begin like this. In addition to forbidding interracial relationships, apartheid and Jim Crow affected blacks' opportunities for education. Trevor Noah's early education was certainly dictated by his race because, and then you would go on, using an example from Born a Crime. And then the next paragraph would begin, just like apartheid in South Africa, Jim Crow severely limited blacks' access to education. So again, we're keeping that alternating pattern. All right, we're keeping that alternating pattern. And really, you can develop your entire essay in this way. And just with our example, we're only 1, 2, 3 paragraphs in, and you know, we're very close to the end of page 2. So, you know, just a few more examples, and it really helps if you can like pull these examples beforehand. But it's really helpful, you know, to use this alternating pattern. It'll go a long way in helping keep you organized. All right, and then finally, for your conclusion, you just want to wrap up. Okay, you just want to wrap up. Don't introduce any new material. You can definitely reiterate, you know, ideas you've been driving at, you know, throughout your essay. So, you know, don't feel like you have to, you know, drop all this new content in your conclusion. In fact, you actually want to do the opposite, you know, in your conclusion. Just give your reader that sense of closure. Okay, give your reader that sense of closure. While it may seem that oppression is human nature, Using the law and violence to gain an advantage over a particular group is a choice. The desire for power has caused systems of oppression to be created, and the effects of these systems can often be felt for generations. While South Africa and the US have made some strides in race relation, there is still much work to be done for full equality to be fully realized, for equality to be fully realized. Trevor Noah's and David Pilgrim's writings serve as reminders of a tragic past that people are in danger of repeating if racism is not addressed in a meaningful way. Okay, so here's our little note on the side. The conclusion wraps up the paper without introducing any new material. That's critical. Don't put any new ideas in your conclusion. Don't do a book review saying that you liked the book or you didn't like it. And don't. It's fine, if you learned from the book, but you don't have to share, any grand, life lessons that you learn from our text. And like I said, even though, it is a great thing because the book is about just relevant topics. Okay, and then here, this is just this is what you guys have already seen before you started your practice. But I will put the new document on D2L with those paragraphs added. All right. So here's just some tips, right? Intro, like we said, start with that attention grabber, and then here's some examples of potential attention grabbers. Okay. Don't start with like, have you ever, or did you know, or a question like that. And then provide some background or context. 2, 3, 4 sentences. That's plenty for this. Maybe a sentence about Jim Crow or in a sentence about apartheid. That's it for your intro. You don't need much more than that. Make sure you mention the title and author of each source. And then finally, thesis statement. Thesis statement's most important. Okay. And then body paragraphs, topic sentence, relevant supporting details. Okay. One idea per paragraph. All right. One idea per paragraph. And then make sure every sentence in the body of your essay, make sure it has a purpose, right? You don't want any, filler content in your in your essay. So, don't put, things that don't really serve your overall purpose. Okay. And that means, keeping things that are like overly opinionated. Try keeping that out of your essay. Okay. And then your conclusion, like I said, just give your reader that sense of closure. And then here's some things that don't you certainly don't want to do in your essay. And this is one of the main ones I've been seeing in just the practices I've looked at in both of my sections of 1060. Try to stay away from thesis statements like this. This essay will be about, this essay will discuss, okay. And then, don't, if we look back, at this body paragraph, it gives the reader enough information for them to make sense of the quote we use. And it's the same thing with the paragraph about Trevor Noah's book. So that's what I mean, by avoid underdeveloped examples. When you're writing about something that happened in the text or something from an article, think about what the reader needs to know to understand that. Okay, what background information are you going to have to fill in? And that's how you develop, a body paragraph. Okay. Always follow up quotes with your own words, definitely. Okay. Make sure you cite your quotes properly. For the book, since we're using multiple sources for this essay, a book and an article, when you cite Trevor Noah's book, it's always going to be author's last name, page number. Okay. Spell it right. All right. And then for the article, it's always going to be the author's last name. Okay, since your article, I don't think it has page numbers, so don't worry about inserting page numbers. Just go with the author's last name. That's fine. Okay, definitely don't turn into a summary, a 3-page summary. Again, read the prompt, and make sure you do what's being asked of you. And I can tell you right off the bat, you're not being asked to summarize either of these sources. So Make sure you're putting together an essay that's organized, the best way you can. Okay, best way you can. Intro, your body paragraphs, where you use the alternating style, and then your conclusion. Okay, that's a well organized essay, and one that supports a thesis statement. Okay, and I have another document that's on D2L, or that I'll post on D2L also. And this one is just called impromptu tips. All right. And these are just like some quick tips, or like somewhat of a cheat sheet, that you can use on your final assessment. So the section on top, it just goes through like some quick tips about MLA, how to cite. Okay. All of your material from our text, last name, page number. Don't put in like a comma or like PG, the number sign, or anything like that. Signal phrases. I know on the a couple of the couple final assessments I got, I wrote like, make sure you use signal phrases. This is what I mean. Noah writes, okay. Noah comments on his mother's parenting style, and then you go into the quote. Robert, Trevor's father, explains, if you're mentioning, a person from the text, and it's the first time you're mentioning them, just, let your reader know who they are, like this, in between commas. Robert, Trevor's father, explains, then you go right into your quote. Also, no matter who is speaking, make sure your citation is Noah, because overall it's coming from his text. Okay. And then here's what this looks like in action. Okay. And then here's, more tips about intros, body paragraphs, and conclusions. And then finally, this is more just like a reiteration of, the other material I just went through. The do's and do nots. Okay. So the final assessment, good people, it is Monday, or it'll be posted Monday, and you'll have until Friday to get it done. Make sure you get it done on time, because there isn't going to be much time for wiggle room, for your essay. We're going to be right up against the end of the semester. All right. So I will get this video lecture converted and uploaded to YouTube, and then I'll post it on our D2L site. Okay. So all I got, people. Have a great night.